Hello, everybody, and welcome into another edition of Texas Longhorns Live. This is number 90. I am Matthew. This is Tommy. As always, it's on a Tuesday. Had some issues yesterday, stomach issues, unfortunately. So we moved it to Tuesday instead of a Monday. But we usually are here on Mondays, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So please hit that like button and subscribe down below. And as always, we are brought to you by FanDuel. Can you guys go out and check it out right now? Texas, they have a really big SEC game tomorrow in basketball. Florida is favored by 6.5 points. I think Texas can cover that line. Tommy, do you think Texas has a chance in that game?
I think if you get Lucina Traore back on the court, I think you have a shot. When you look at Florida, they have about every 7-footer, it seems, in the entire SEC. So you're going
Yeah.
to have to get some of that size back. If you don't, it's going to be an uphill battle. But it's a team that, if they get this win, you could lock up your tournament spot. So it's a massive one at home where they played really well this year. So at least they can cover that 6.5. Hopefully, win some bets for some people, and then hopefully get that money line as well.
Yeah, go over and check it out on FanDuel. Florida's favored by 6.5, so you're getting Texas plus 6.5 there. If you do want to bet the Longhorns over at FanDuel, we really appreciate them sponsoring the show. Let's jump into the first topic, which is the out-of-conference scheduling as a whole in college football, but especially Texas. So Texas plays Ohio State this year. We played them last year. We played Michigan in 27. We played Notre Dame in 28 and 29. All those have been confirmed to stay on the books. And then Arizona State was canceled. And Tommy, you have some opinions on that and how it was framed as well. So I'll let you start with this one.
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily that I overly disagree with either decision by either school, or I totally bemoan the fact that people are canceling these games. I don't love it. I'll be totally honest. I love for these big time games to be played. The biggest issue I had with this conversation was just kind of how it was framed from the jump. I think the biggest thing about these, whenever they're talking about going back and forth and teams wanting to cancel or teams wanting to keep out of conference game going, these are always joint decisions. There's never a team that's going to call up a team and say, "What's your price? I'll pay you whatever it takes to take you off the books," especially when you're Texas or Arizona State. I don't think that's what happened here. I just think the Arizona State folks seem to get to it first and seem to have the news first. So they got to frame it as Texas kind of backing out of a game instead of both teams deciding what's best for them. That's what happens in these scenarios. Ohio State, Alabama going through the same thing right now. That's going to be a joint decision if that does come end up coming to fruition. So all of this stuff, it's pretty nebulous. It's not necessarily the most important thing, especially with a game that's in 2029 and 2030. But the framing of this conversation always felt a little bit goofy to me before we got into the Texas part of it. It was just now we had a chance to talk about it on here. So it's always been a little bit goofy the way we talk about these things. Like one team is absolutely leading the charge and one team is totally standing beside what makes college football great. It's always somewhere in the middle. The teams always find a way in the middle. So I just felt like that was a little bit goofy overall, the way this thing was framed, as Texas being the bad guy and Arizona State just losing a game that they really, really wanted to play. It was obviously both schools coming together, deciding that this was the best track for them, something that a lot of teams are doing right about now.
Yeah, I agree. This is never, I mean, for the most part, I do think there's some sides that have come to the table, like Alabama and Ohio State. Seems to be Alabama more pushing for that than Ohio State. But at the end of the day, if it is going to get canceled, then you both have to agree to it, or Alabama's going to have to pay Ohio State a lot of money to cancel that football game. So that's
Yeah.
going to be interesting. But I agree with you on the Texas-Arizona State thing. I just think it was reported in a way it made Texas look like we're running from it, which is interesting to me because let's be honest here. If we play Arizona State, as long as like everything's about the same, where if Dillingham's there as their head coach and Sarkis there here's our head coach, I think we're beating them both times we play them. I'm pretty confident in saying that unless they like up their budget a lot. But it's one of those things. Texas kind of doesn't get any benefit from playing a team like Arizona State. Arizona State is one of those teams where if you beat them, people will say, well, you should beat them. And if you lose to them, it's going to be a big deal. Whereas, we're going to play Ohio State this year. We're going to play Michigan next year. We're going to play Notre Dame the years after that. Those are 50-50 toss-up type games with the talent those guys recruit. So if you lose those games, yeah, it kind of hurts. And if you win those games, it does help a lot. Arizona State isn't one of those teams to me where I'm like, damn, that's a really big game. Like, we win that, we're basically in the playoff. We could win that game, still lose 2 to 3 games, and we're out of the playoff because, no offense to them, they're just not a marquee name unless something happens here in the next couple of years where they jump into that conversation where they're, the another Texas Tech out of the Big 12. So I understand why Texas is canceling that. I think going to 9 conference games is another thing. I think you're going to see a lot more SEC teams in general. Like we have basically had to add another big time game to our schedule. Why would we add another one? Why don't we take this one off? So I think that's super interesting and something to consider as well.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think the funny thing about this is the conversation seemingly has always been kind of shaped around what your record is. And we saw this last season. I don't think Texas should have made the playoff. I really don't. I don't think they were a playoff team this past year. But we did see this kind of come to fruition. You play a team like Ohio State on the road, a team that everyone, including myself, considered to be the best team coming into the season, the most talented team pretty much throughout the season. You lose by 7 points, and you still don't find a way to get a little bit edge up when you talk about the CFP. Now, obviously, that can change depending on who's in that CFP room, the precedent that they set. But I'd wait for them to make that precedent. I'd wait for them to fully reward you for playing that game. And obviously, you got to get a win. You can't, whine when you don't get a win and then you lose to a team like Florida. You play poor football for a lot of the season. But I do think it's a reality that if they had played UTEP, if they had played UTSA, if they had played a layup in that spot, they're playing in the playoff. And I don't know how that goes. I don't think they're winning a national title or anything, but it's a team that had a lot of ability and was kind of rolling downhill late in the season. So the idea that the record isn't a deciding factor in the CFP feels a little bit silly to me. I think it's kind of proven over the last couple of years that that's absolutely one of the factors and a big factor in this conversation. The question is, can they make that not the case? And then bring back Arizona State, add Alabama, or add, Ohio State, add Michigan again, play these really tough games consistently because you're getting the benefit of it. You're getting the benefit of being playing better teams, seeing what you're like against these elite teams, and then getting the little bump up that you might need in the CFP. So I think it's one of those conversations that I'd love for it to be the other way. I'd love for everyone to play tough games and us to have great out of conference games and every team to be treated the way they should if they play those tough out of conference games. That's not where we are right now. And you have to be able to meet times where they are. And the reality is, Steve Sarkisian isn't getting hired the year after this one because he beat Arizona State and Tempe. He's getting hired because he gets to the playoff and he wins a national title. So that's the reality of this situation. If it wasn't so cut and dry, which I don't think it should be, then we probably have a different conversation. But it is as cut and dry of, do you make the playoff? Do you win national titles? He has to put his team in the best position to do that, and this is probably the right step to do that.
Yeah, I mean, the sport of college football really needs a commissioner. I mean, that's just, the gist of it. If we don't get a commissioner, then it's going to be one of those things where you're going to see really crappy regular seasons where we really don't know anything about the conferences until we get to the playoff, which I think is a bad thing for the sport. I think it's really cool to have those, interleague plays. Like baseball used to have that, every so often. Now it's every weekend. I think it's a little bit overdone, but I'd rather have it overdone than, never know. Whereas once we get to the playoff, literally, we're going to be discovering things. How good is the Big 12? How good is the ACC? How good is the SEC? How good is the Big 10? Before you would kind of have an idea, I think we're headed towards where we're not going to know at all because we don't have any cross-section games. It's basically going to work. Texas is going to play the SEC, and then we're going to play 3 crappy out-of-conference teams, UTEP, Texas State, Tennessee State, or whatever. I disagree with it. I wish we didn't do it. I think it's really good for the sport when you have Ohio State versus Texas week 1 or week 2. I think it's really good for the sport when you have Texas versus Notre Dame. I think it's really good for the sport when you have Alabama versus Ohio State. Those matchups are really cool, unique. They really don't happen often in the regular season, and they didn't happen at all basically until we got, a BCS system. So I wish they would continue. I think you're going to see them die out. Maybe they come back a little bit more when we do get to 16 because that's inevitable at this point. I just hope it doesn't go to 24 again. This is a balancing act, and right now college football hasn't done a good job of this balancing act across the board, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, and if we move to 16, maybe that opens the door for some teams to be rewarded without, jumping all the way up to getting a home playoff game for playing some of these tough out of conference games. So there is a middle ground here. It's not to say, I saw one of our chatters say he'd rather just play Arizona State. So would I. If it was fully up to me, we'd play that football game. But the reality is, Steve Sarkisian, Chris Del Conte, they are defined by what this football program does in terms of the playoff, in terms of national titles. if taking that game off your schedule puts you in a better light, then that's the way it's going to be. Now, the SEC did put in the rule that you have to play one Power Four out of conference game. So unless that changes, they'll have to reschedule this game. Not with Arizona State, but with some other team. They'll have to find a way to do that. The weird thing about this is in 2030, now it might not impact this game. It very well could, depending on how all of this goes down. But there's a lot of TV deals, there's a lot of conference deals that are kind of have some openings in them around that time period. There's going to be another sect of realignment. There's going to be a new set of teams coming into the Big 12 or the ACC because they probably lost some teams to the SEC or the Big 10. I don't love it. Again, don't love it, but that's the reality of the sport right now. I don't hate waiting, and I don't really love that we schedule these games, 10 years advance or whatever. So I'm more than happy to wait a little bit and see how these conferences, play out and schedule someone from the P4 then if the SEC still has that rule in place. We'll see how all that develops. Obviously, a lot changing right now.
No, that's a really good point. I forgot about the rule the SEC has. Yeah, it's going to be interesting how they go about that. And like you said, there's going to be another round of realignment that's going to affect it as well. And I completely agree about. I don't know why we do this 4, 5, 6 years out because COVID proved that's possible that we don't. We just do a year or two at a time. That literally proved that. Like we are just magically could play these games, without having to actually schedule them 5 years in advance. So
Yeah,
that proved that. Go ahead.
It goes back to your point about the commissioner. It's just the reality of you need to have a governing body for college football. You need to find a way to have a streamlined communication between the schools, between the conferences, and between the office that actually has power to keep these schools in place and keep these schools from breaking rules and doing all that good stuff. But the reality is, it is one of those situations that I think I'd rather us not be talking about canceling Arizona State, but I think when you're in the situation that Steve Sarkisian specifically is in, I totally understand the decision, and I don't fully understand, approaching the conversation as if you don't understand the decision at any level, I suppose.
No, I agree. Again, guys, please hit that like button. Please subscribe down below. Let us know what you think of the whole out-of-conference scheduling. Should we play Arizona State? Who else would you like to see on the schedule instead? We really appreciate that. We'll jump into these comments really quick. Lendl says, I would rather just play Arizona State. They're calling us cowards. I think Tommy and I both agree on that. I mean, if it was up to us, we would play them because, again, I think we beat them. I'm not really concerned with Arizona State. He also says, in 2005, we beat Ohio State the second week of the season. Will we repeat, Tommy? Do you think we beat Ohio State week 2?
I like to think so right now. Ohio State, I have a number of questions about that I don't think are going to be answered until they step on the field against Texas. So it's a toss-up. It'll be really, really interesting to watch what Julian Sayin does compared to Arch Manning. I think both those quarterbacks kind of in a similar place when it comes to development. Very different players, but kind of in a similar place when it comes to that. So it's a team that I am having a tough time nailing down, at least this far out. Losing Caleb Downs, losing Sonny Styles, it's going to be tough. I'd lean towards Texas right now, but we'll talk again in August, and then we'll figure out where I stand then.
Yeah, I think going into the season, especially early on, I think you should just favor the team with the least amount of question marks. And last year I ignored it, like when we played them, and I had this good feeling of beating them week 1, and then as the game got closer, I was like, I don't think we're going to beat them. But it was too late because I already put some money on it at that time. But I do think we're going to beat Ohio State this time because I just think they have way more question marks. They're returning not that much on defense. We don't know how the wide receivers are going to look other than Jeremiah Smith. Like, who's going to step up and be that Carnell Tate this year? I don't know if they have that on the roster. Is Bo Jackson enough in the backfield with what else they have? Because no offense, they don't really have any other running backs to me that are just like, wow, that guy's a really good football player. Bo Jackson is good, but other than that, it's kind of a thin room. And then how does Julian Sayin handle pressure in the pocket? That's another thing I want to see. So they have a lot of questions. I'm not saying Texas is a perfect football team by any stretch of the imagination, but I just think right now they have more questions than Texas heading into next season.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
This kind of fits. How can Arch improve? So let's move over to that. I have 3 things written down. Tommy, you could have as many as you want, but I'm interested to see what do you think are like the big improvements or small improvements Arch Manning can make for next season?
Yeah, I have a couple of things that kind of just need tweaking, and then one thing that just outright needs to be fixed, or it's going to be a problem, and he won't be able to fix it mid-season, I don't think. So the areas that just need a little bit of tweaking. the ball placement. And this is something that we'll talk about in a second. It's a function of the mechanics and footwork, which is the thing he has to fix. But it is an issue. He missed high, he missed low, he missed inside, outside. He was a little all over the place. And that tends to happen when you have some tough pockets and you have to navigate and spit the ball out as quickly as possible. So that's something that just needs to get a little bit better. I tend to believe that has as much to do with everyone else around him as it has to do with Arch. So that'll be something to watch. Layering the football, he can throw an incredible one ball. He can throw a ball. He can throw incredible digs. He can throw a deep ball really, really well. When he has to take a little bit off of it and when he has to layer it over a linebacker and under a safety, it can be a little bit problematic at times. It puts the ball in some tough areas. Now, I think he's going to take more risks this upcoming year, and I think you're going to get paid off more than you're going to get hurt by them. But he's going to have to be a little bit better about layering the football, a little bit better about using his touch. Did some better stuff down the stretch, but need to see a little bit more often. And then the footwork and the mechanics are the biggest thing. Sometimes he's overstriding. Sometimes he's, pulling really aggressively across his body, and it's having him leaning and just kind of using way too much of his arm, not enough of his, base. Because you see him in 2024, and when you release the practice videos and him working with his private coach, he's really clean. In 2024, it was some of the more clean mechanics that you'll see at a quarterback. And then in 2025, it kind of just fell off a cliff. I think that had more to do with the offensive line than anything else, but it is something that has to get fixed. There's some, habits he could have learned during the season that have to be kind of unlearned. This offseason, I tend to believe he has the ability and obviously the infrastructure to figure this thing out, but obviously something that needs to get fixed, or the problems are going to keep being a little bit up and down and a little bit all over the place.
Yeah, I'll just hit on something that you hit on last there. That's definitely on my list is the footwork. And like you said, overstrider. I think Brooks Austin, again, Film Network guy, does a really good job of breaking this down. You see it all the time. You don't want your base to be, you can be a little bit more than shoulder width, but anything more than that, and it causes your ball to die on you. And you saw that on Arch a lot. Like it would come out and look like, man, this thing's going to be a rocket. And then all of a sudden it would die towards the end because it would flutter on him. And that has everything to do with mechanics. So if you just clean that up, I mean, we're talking about, I think his completion percentage improves by 4 to 5%. I think he's going to throw 5 to 10 more touchdowns just based off of that. That's not even the talent around him. Like, we could have just run it back from last year. And if you just fix that, I think that's what you're looking at. You're probably looking at 65, 66% completion percentage and 40 plus touchdowns between rushing and throwing the football. So with the talent, the sky is the limit. So definitely got to get that, worked on, and then get down and protect yourself. That's another thing. Like, I know he wants those extra yards, and 1 or 2 yards is cool. And in certain situations, I'm for it. Guys, if it's the college football playoff, we need 2 yards and you got to get blasted. I understand going for it. If this is Texas State week 1, I don't need Arch Manning to be fighting for 1 to 2 yards. There's no point in that. We're going to beat that team by 4 to 5 plus touchdowns. We could put whoever in at quarterback on our team other than Arch Manning, we'd still win by that much. So you don't need to fight for those extra yards. Listen to what your grandpa says on the phone every time you hang up, which is, hey, protect yourself, get down. Guess what? Get down. And guess what? If you don't want to slide because you don't like sliding, run out of bounds. Especially like in college, you can probably get away with it more, and he's a big guy, but you're not Josh Allen, dude. Like, Josh Allen is 6'5", 230, 240 pounds. He's 10, 15 pounds bigger, 2-3 inches taller. And he's getting beat up in the NFL. He just had to have offseason surgery. So you got to learn to do that for the next level, especially. So that's another thing for me. And then the short game. We saw the mesh route with Ryan Wingo open a lot this year, and they could not get on the same page. When Arch delivered a good catchable ball, Ryan Wingo dropped it. When Ryan Wingo was open sometimes, Arch overthrew him or underthrew him. We saw that in the Ohio State game. We're talking about probably a 14-14 game if Arch Manning just dumps it down to Ryan Wingo because it's one-on-one with the safety. If he outruns him, it's a touchdown. We're talking about overtime in the first week of the season. But instead, he overthrows it and goes over his head, and that's basically the ball game. So got to get that down. Ryan Wingo is a yak guy. If you can get him the ball in space, he's going to lead the country in yak, in my opinion, if Arch is accurate. I think he's that talented with his legs after the catch. I actually do think that's where Cam Coleman can come in with the deep ball, because Cam Coleman's just going to win those one-on-one balls. If you're not, even if it's not that accurate, if it's not that good of a throw, he'll still win it. So if they can get that down on the underneath with Ryan Wingo, I think that's really going to help this offense.
Yeah, no, I think that's the biggest thing that you saw early in the season that changed in the back half of the season when he started to find his groove was Ryan Wingo was doing Ryan Wingo things. I believe he might have led the country in yak in the final month of the season because he is that special. Because when you put the ball in this guy's hands, moving downfield, he can do really remarkable things. So that's absolutely something. I think it all kind of plays off each other when you talk about the footwork, missing guys, not that connection with Ryan Wingo on short routes. It all comes back to the offensive line not being what it should have been a year ago, not being what we all expected it to be. If it finds its way to being a good pass blocking group, maybe not 2024 level, maybe not Kelvin Banks and all the elite players. Now, I think it could be at that level, but let's just say it's a tick behind that. I still think that's good enough. One of the things I wrote down that he is going to be great at, and Arch Manning, he's going to be great at managing a pocket. He knows what terrible pockets look like. He saw them entirety of last season. He was really good late in the season at getting out of those pockets or just navigating them and releasing the football. I think it started really in the Florida game. Now, the Florida game, there were still some growing pains to go through, but he made a number of plays off schedule, releasing from a dirty pocket and making plays downfield against Florida. It continued throughout the rest of the season. So he's going to be good there. You have to meet him halfway. You have to make sure that that's not the way that you have to create offense. His legs, we talked about it last week, that can't be the way that you create offense. It can be a cool add-on to what you do offensively, but if that's the way you're creating offense, you have a problem. And you have something that is not going to be easily fixable in the middle of the season. You're going to have to find a way to go into the season taking more off his shoulders and just allowing him to go play football every weekend instead of thinking about every little thing that a guy that was making his first start up in Columbus, Ohio, probably shouldn't have had to think about. So it's really just taking more off his shoulders. All of the ability is incredible. I fully expect him to be the number 1 or 2 taken player in the 2027 draft, or I think he could have been number 1 this year if you really wanted to go out. Now, glad he's back because I think he can become a real football player instead of a really toolsy guy with a ton of ability. He's one of those guys that I think can be downright special as long as everyone else kind of meets him halfway this upcoming season.
No, 100%. I completely agree with you. If you just look at, I think he was leading the team in rushing up to like week 9 or 10, and then finally Trey Wisner did take over. But you're not winning anything of substance with that. Like, you might be Johnny Manziel, you win a Heisman, but he didn't win anything either when it comes to team accolades. So unless you're Cam Newton, which, again, that guy's a freak, you can't lead your team in rushing and passing. You have to have some help there. Sark talked about it yesterday in his press conference of we're going to get back to a more Texas-style run game with the 2 running backs we have, which is going to be interesting because I honestly, that's all different conversation. I don't know what the hell that means because the running game has not worked for a couple years. So that's going to be interesting what that means and what that looks like next year. But, again, guys, please hit that like button. Please subscribe down below. Let us know in the comments how you think Arch Manning can improve for next year. We're going to check out your comments again real quick. Lendell says, I'm looking forward to Texas versus Tennessee, the real UT trophy to the winner. I agree with that. They should do that. I don't know. I said that going into the SEC. I thought, like, we discussed new rivalries possible on this channel, and Tennessee was up there for me. It was Tennessee and LSU as the top 2 teams that I could see Texas being rivals with heading into the SEC. What do you think about that, Tommy?
Yeah, no, Tennessee feels like one that could really kind of take off with that real UT moniker kind of being the catalyst. And let's add some trophies. The Big Ten has a trophy for just about every single game they play. We might as well have some trophies over there in Neyland when we do play them. But going to be a great game. Obviously, Joey Aguilar not going to be a part of that team, so it definitely changes kind of the calculation there. But that'll be a really fun game, and wouldn't mind at all a little bit of a trophy action in that one.
Yeah, I mean, the last time we played them in any major sport was March Madness. They ended up winning that game by like 5 or 6. So technically, I guess you can give them the real UT for that. But the funniest thing was when Andre Sweat got drafted by the Titans and was talking to their reporters, and they asked him who the real UT is, and the look he gave him was hilarious. So
I love him. Yeah,
it was funny. So yeah, I hope we beat them. And Texas is the real UT. That orange is way too damn gaudy. The last time we played them was in 1968 in the Cotton Bowl. I didn't know it's been that long. That's pretty crazy.
Wow. Yeah,
that's nothing about college football. It shouldn't be that long for teams like Texas and Tennessee to play each other.
It's another thing that comes down to not having a governing body that makes much sense at this moment.
Yeah. Let's jump over to this because spring practice is approaching. The spring game is approaching like a month and a half from now, basically, maybe even a little bit less. Wide receiver depth. So we'll go into the guy. I'm not going to go into some of the younger guys like Chris Stewart and Cohen Brown. We can talk about them later. But the guys that are going to be jockeying for playing time: Ryan Wingo, Cam Coleman, Emmett Mosley, Khalil Lockett, Dalen McCutcheon, Jermaine Bishop, and Sterling Burkhalter. I don't think I'm missing anyone from there that's going to get any major playing time. Tommy, do you see any surprise in this room? Like who could jump up and be, I guess challenge for the third spot? I'm not going to say second because I think Ryan Wingo and Cam Coleman are locked into 1 and 2, but challenge Emmett Mosley, I guess.
Yeah. I think the interesting thing when you talk about the number ones, at least going into the season, it's going to be Cam Coleman, Ryan Wingo, Emmett Mosley. Those are the clear number ones. I think we've talked about it on here. That might be the best number ones you have in the entire country when it comes to the wide receiver position. So I think you're set there. I do think Cleve Lockett's a really dangerous player. Where he fits into this equation gets a little bit more hairy when you add a guy like Sterling Burkholder because he was probably that X backup to Cam Coleman. Now, he can probably slide over to Z at the Ryan Wingo position and play that and see what that looks like. I don't know how different that would look from what Ryan Wingo's doing. So that's something to watch and how they kind of approach that overall. Dalen McCutcheon, really, really strong player. He was on the field as early as anyone in these freshman wide receivers and very smart player, plays the slot really well. He would obviously be the guy that could, challenge Emmett Mosley the most. But the player I'm most excited about behind those top three is probably Khaleke Lockett. I think he has tons of ability and he flashed it in the Michigan game. Hopefully he can get on the field a little bit more often this upcoming season.
Yeah, I agree. I'll keep saying this. Might be wrong on it, but I'll keep saying it. I think Khaleke Lockett out of that high school class, which was now 2 years ago, was the best freshman wide receiver or best wide receiver coming out. I know DeCorey Moore has been really good at Oregon, but Khaleke Lockett hasn't gotten a chance, and the chance he's had, he's looked pretty good. It's going to be interesting because I agree with you. I think Khaleke Lockett will beat him out. But the thing is, early on, it wouldn't surprise me if you just want a steady wide receiver coming in for certain reps, certain time. We'll have to see. But I think Khaleke Lockett should be attached at the hip to Cam Coleman. I think there's a lot of similarities there. I don't think he's as good, straight line speed wise, but I think ball in the air, I think there's very, very big similarities there. If you go watch the high school tape, Khaleke Lockett wasn't a 50-50 ball guy. He was an 80-20 ball guy. Like when it was thrown up, he would come down with it. And what was special about him, and a lot like Cam Coleman, when he came down, he could stay on his feet and run after the catch as well. And I actually think he's probably better than that, than even Cam Coleman. Like that's a very rare talent to a high point of football, laying on your feet and outrun people at the end. So I think Khaleke Lockett should take away as much as possible in spring practice and spring camp from Cam Coleman because I think there's a lot of similarities there. I think you can learn a lot from him. And from everything we've heard so far about Cam Coleman, he's come in. He's been really good with his attitude. He's wanting to work. He's wanting to get better. He wants to be, a high NFL draft pick and win a national championship at Texas. And I think that was like the determining factor for him going to Texas is the opportunity to compete for a national championship. So, I'm really excited what Khaleke Lockett can do this year, but not even that. When Ryan Wingo probably goes pro after this year and Cam Coleman, I think 2 years from now, we're looking at Khaleke Lockett as the type of guy that can be 1,000-yard wide receiver.
Yeah, no, I think he's downright special. I mean, the play against Michigan is probably the best play when it comes to just straight up body control outside of maybe the Ryan Wingo play against Georgia, if you know what I'm talking about, that kind of deep over that he just makes a crazy play. In terms of body control, that's about as good as you're going to find when he finds a way to open his hips, get to that back shoulder football, and then stay on his feet and get to the end zone, as you said. That the interesting part of that conversation is it could just come down to how special Jermaine Bishop is. If this guy is ready to go and he's ready to be the backup for Ryan Wingo, which I wouldn't be surprised by at all, I think you have Lockett at that X position, and then you have an X position that I think has three guys that can give you genuinely good reps. Now, Sterling Burkholder, maybe not the special athlete two guys are, but he comes in with more catches and more yards than everyone not on the first line at that wide receiver group. So he's an experienced guy, and he can take a little bit off the shoulders of Cam Coleman. So how all this shakes out will probably have more to do with what a guy like Bishop looks like, what a guy like Michael Terry maybe looks like a wide receiver, still trying to figure out how those guys fit into the equation. But if Bishop's ready to roll, I think you move Lockett over to X, and then you let those guys duke it out. Because I think you're right. I think Burkholder, but never a bad thing to have a little bit of insurance at the X position, especially how important it can be in this offense.
Yeah, I think Bishop's going to be interesting because I think you can use him in a multiple different sets. Like what I was thinking when you were talking there about him is a full house set. Like that was something you saw a couple years ago with Sark. And if you have that, you could go Hollywood Smothers or Leek Brown and Jermaine Bishop lined up in the backfield in a full house set. You're doing that. It's going to be hard to defend Like someone's going to be multiple guys back there, probably going to have mismatches in the passing game. And I don't think any of those guys, maybe Hollywood Smothers can because he's not as shifty, but Raleek Brown and Jermaine Bishop are not being covered by a linebacker in space. If you get them one-on-one, that is going to be a mismatch. I hope Sark is doing stuff like that. We saw that a lot with Jaden Blue and Keelan Robinson. I think these guys are actually probably a little bit more, NFL ready and talented than those guys were. Like they were really good prospects, but I think Hollywood Smothers and Raleek Brown are ready to go to the NFL right now. And then Jermaine Bishop is just as good of an athlete as the other two guys I mentioned before. So I would love to see them all on the field at the same time, just as many playmakers you can out there. Like Michael Terry, too, if you want to throw him out there, he's a really good, I think, weapon. I don't know if he's a great where he's going to be at right now is tight end. Or no, sorry, running back where I think he should be is tight end. We'll talk about that depth later, but it's going to be interesting how he's used at that position. But overall, Jermaine Bishop, I completely agree with you, is the wild card in the wide receiver room. He could be, the thing is, the question, I guess, should be if he's Xavier Worthy, how much time would a freshman Xavier Worthy get in this room? Because, guys, that room he came into as a freshman was freaking terrible. The only reason he was the number one right away is because that room was really, really bad, and he had to be. So I guess that would be my question.
Yeah, I think that's the really interesting part of this is I think he's every bit as special coming into the team. I think he's a little bit more comfortable out of the backfield than Xavier was for obvious reasons. He lined up there more often, but I think he's one of those guys. Him and Terry are kind of your chess pieces you could use in this offense in different ways. I think Bishop is probably more likely to get on the field at least earlier, but that might just be Michael Terry kind of finding himself in between a couple of positions like we've talked about. So I think Jermaine Bishop is kind of he could be the thing that kind of sets off a lot of dominoes in this room. If he's ready to roll, they slide him up right behind Ryan Wingo. They get him on the field for 10, 15 snaps. We've talked about it. Sark likes to play his guys. So he's going to have the top one, the ones out there consistently, but he's going to have to change a little bit over the next little bit because you're going to have to play 16 or 17 games to win a national title. So it's going to be interesting to watch this kind of group take form. And I think Khalil Lockett, Jermaine Bishop, that Z receiver position really in general, how that shakes out is going to inform how the X position shakes out and how the rotations really shake out in the end of the day.
Yeah, I agree. And then what do you think about McCutcheon? Because I'm going to be honest, I don't think there's that much big of a ceiling for him. I think he'd be a nice wide receiver, but I don't think I've ever watched him and been like, man, this guy's special. I never watched him in high school and thought he was special. I kind of just think he's a number 3 on a really good football team. So do you think Khalil Lockett could pass him up on the depth chart in this wide receiver room?
Yeah, I tend to think so. I think in terms of just getting more snaps on the football field, that could just be a positional thing overall, but I do think that's probably going to happen. The funny thing about the slot position in general at Texas, but especially the last couple of years, it hasn't necessarily been your biggest guy or your best guy. I think the biggest thing is you want a really smart player that knows where to sit down in zone coverage and can catch the ball really effectively. I think Dalen McCutcheon can do all of those things. Now, you probably don't want him as your starter at slot every single game, and Ryan Niblett could probably help with that in the occasion of a possible Emmett Mosley injury again. But at the end of the day, if that group is healthy, especially at the slot position, I think you have 3 guys that can give you sustained play, not necessarily as elite as Emmett Mosley will give you with the top group, but I don't think you're taking a massive drop off going from Niblett to McCutcheon or going from Mosley to Niblett or Mosley to McCutcheon. I think you're going to have good play from the slot position, really regardless of injury or anything. You love that group to stay healthy, but I think McCutcheon and Niblett are plenty comfortable, at least factoring in the way they can. I don't think McCutcheon's going to go for 1,000 yards or do anything incredible. I think he can fit in and kind of open the door for the really special players in this offense and Cam Coleman and Ryan Wingo.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. Again, guys, please hit that like button. Please subscribe down below. Let us know what you think of the wide receiver depth going into the spring. Do you think Texas did enough in the portal? Personally, I think we both think they did. And just with the room overall, what do you think about it? So, again, please hit that like button, subscribe. We really appreciate that. Tommy, let's move over to the tight end depth. This is a very interesting room. Mike Masunis from Michigan State. You have Nick Townsend, who I think we're both high on, Spencer Shannon, Emery Winston. And then I put him on here, but, I mean, if he's playing this year, we're in some serious trouble, and that's Will Randall. So there's really only 4 guys here. What do you think about this room in general?
It might be my favorite group on the entire team. And it's not necessarily that I think they're the most remarkable. I think the wide receiver group and the running, I think the playmakers around them are probably more special overall. But I think you have four guys that are really well-rounded players. I think Emery Winston needs a little bit more time to get comfortable in the blocking area, but you have three guys that I would consider elite to semi-elite blockers, and Nick Townsend, Michael Masunas, and Spencer Shannon, who is a downright beast and will be a huge part of what this offense is going to be in 2027. But I think it's interesting because it'll really come down to what type of personnel are you running? Are you running with two tight ends on the field like Sark loves to do and has been, one to do in the past? Or do you run more 11 personnel? Because you have a lot of special players on this football team. You have three receivers that I think can be the very best in the country. You have a running back room that you're going to want to be on the field consistently. So do you run more 11 personnel and maybe Nick Townsend's more the pass first guy and Michael Masunas more the run first guy? I do think those are the two guys that you'll probably see the most, or at least see the most highlights of, because I think they're the best pass catchers and blockers. Overall, I think Nick Townsend's the special player. I think getting Michael Masunas as an add-on in this room, or not necessarily an add-on, but someone that doesn't necessarily need to be incredible gangbusters type player to be good at this position, it's pretty incredible. I think there's a group that has three guys that I would feel very confident at just about any situation being in, and then a guy like Amari Winston that you put in for one play, he can totally change the game in the red zone or on a big fourth down, just one-on-one coverage nightmare. So definitely a group that I really like, and it'll just come down to how many tight ends you have on the field at any given moment. I don't think there's a wrong answer for this group.
Yeah, I think the biggest question mark for me is Spencer Shannon in the pass game because he really hasn't done much. I think he's going to be a pretty good blocker, but there's really no tape of him, being out there and pass catching. We kind of had to rely on Jordan Washington, that sort of role, and he didn't meet that mark either. Like, I don't honestly think that's that big of a loss. I think there is potential there, but he just kind of got in a weird space for me because he gained way too much weight, in my opinion. I think he should have lost another 15, 20 pounds. They asked him to put on too much weight, and he kind of slowed him down. But it's going to be interesting how they use Spencer Shannon. But I agree, like Michael Masunas and Nick Townsend, if that is your, 1-2 punch at the tight end position, you want to run 12 out of that. I like it because you're going to be able to block. Nick Townsend is a really, really, really good athlete. Again, if you're doing an end around sweep with a tight end, he's probably a pretty good athlete, and you decide to do that when Nick Townsend for a touchdown versus Texas A&M. So I think he's a special athlete. And Masunas is a pretty good athlete. He's nothing great. I don't think he's even on the level of a Jatavian Sanders or a Gunnar Helm. But I think he'd be kind of what Jack Endries was. I was big on Jack Endries going into last year, but his athleticism was – so I don't know if he was hurt, but it seemed like to me there was a difference between what I saw on tape from Cal to Texas. But I think Michael Masunas can, kind of replicate that. I don't think – he's a burner by any stretch of the imagination. But I think Amari Winston can be a really good football player if he's healthy. He sustained that injury, and how healthy will he be in spring practice? How healthy will he be for the season coming up? If he's healthy, then I think he's got a chance to be a very, very productive tight end in this Texas offense. I could actually see him jumping over Spencer Shannon because I think there is more raw talent there.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing about this group is I think you do have all the boxes checked. Now, it might not be by the same player in terms of Nick Townsend, still a little bit young, still kind of figuring out what he's going to be as a tight end. Michael Masunas, not necessarily the elite athlete that some of these other guys are. Spencer Shannon, not fully comfortable in the pass game, or at least hasn't shown that. Maybe he is plenty comfortable and he just hasn't had to be used. And then Amari Winston, we talked about it, definitely still needs some growing, or needs to get over some growing pains, needs to get healthy, but really, really talented kid that can do some really incredible things. I think you're in a position with this group where you're probably going to have to mix and match early in the season as you find who your quote unquote guy is going to be. I think it's going to be Nick Townsend. I think we both agree on that, but I think there's going to be a moment with this group where you're probably going to decide that you have so many playmakers on this team, and it could just come down to how good the offensive line is. Do they play 12 personnel with Spencer Shannon out there as an extra blocker? Do they feel confident playing 11 personnel while the pass protection holds up? I think that's a big question mark, and I'd love to see them play more 11 personnel. I think you have too many special athletes on this team to not play it more often. But again, Sark loves to play 12 personnel. It's where a lot of his stuff is played out of. I think you have at least three guys that can rotate in pretty consistently. Spencer Shannon probably has to get a little bit better in pass catching, but that's something that I tend to believe he's going to be able to do. And then you have a guy like Amari Winston that you just bring in for one play, maybe on the goal line or something like that, and he makes a big play for you and totally changes the season or that game specifically. So I think it's a really talented group. I think you got 4 guys that will be ready to play in some capacity this upcoming season.
Yeah, and it's never too late. You can add a fifth, move Michael Terry over where he belongs. I just think he fits better in this room. And I think he'd
Yeah,
get more
Michael
playing
Terry's
time in this room.
Yeah, no, he's just one of those guys that I badly want to see on the football field. I think he's a very, very talented kid, but he's stuck in a really weird spot right at this moment. And power to him for going over to running back and filling that gap because not a lot of guys would be willing to do that, especially how talented he was at the wide receiver position coming in. So if tight end's the way to get him on the field, I'm all for it at the end of the day. I think that's a good athlete and someone that you probably don't just want to see on special teams this upcoming season. So we'll see how this group pans out, but I really like the group. I think it's talented. I think it's plenty deep. And I think if you stay healthy, it's going to be one of the more talented and productive tight end rooms, both from pass catching and blocking.
Again, guys, please hit that like button. Please subscribe down below. Let us know what you think of the tight end depth going into spring. Who do you like at the position? Who do you think could be a dark horse? We really appreciate you guys doing that. Let's move over to this. So 2027 recruiting update. We had a quarterback, Knutson, commit to Texas. That they usually get that done early. They got it done early now. We're going to be fighting to keep Easton Royal. That's going to be a really hard commitment to keep because everyone in the country wants him. But there's 3 names that actually just recently Texas, kind of, started pushing for, and they're going to be on visits. That's safety Isaiah Udom, June 12th to June 14th. Cornerback Blake Jennings, June 12th to June 14th. And then coming up, Caleb Seiler, big 6'8" tackle on April 4th. So let's start out with Isaiah Udom. What do you think of his tape overall, Tommy?
He's really, really talented. He's really comfortable at safety. That kind of where you see him most often. Now he'll line up at corner plenty because he's one of the more talented athletes that they have. But South Oak Cliff has plenty of dudes, so that's not going to be a problem for him at all. The biggest thing that I noticed right away is he brings his hat in the run game. He is not afraid to fly downhill and really meet someone really aggressively. Now, you got to be a little bit smarter at times with it because sometimes you can get hit with a mean, cut and then you're looking like an idiot on the ground. But at the end of the day, he has tons of ability and he comes down a hill really, really quickly, plays the ball really well. When the ball's in the air, he has a really good job of tracking it and going up to play a 50-50 ball. He's capable of making those 80-20 in his direction instead of the other way. So really talented kid, one of those guys that has tons of ability in a lot of different ways. I think there's definitely, you probably want him to add some weight if he's going to line up at safety for you, that is. You probably want him to add a little bit of weight. Seemingly has the frame to do it, but we'll see what happens. I think he's a really talented kid, someone that you're probably batting SMU is probably your biggest battle here. So if you can lock up this kid, I don't think he's necessarily, the marquee guy in your class, but he could be a really nice addition to the back half of this class for sure.
Yeah, I think, we talked about the new age of recruiting, and I think you have to go boom or a guy that's willing to sit for 2 years and play. I think he's more of in that category. He's a developmental guy, but he's got a lot of tools, and that's what you look for, tools that you can develop while he's being patient, sits on the bench. And he's guy 6 foot, 180 pounds. He's willing to hit. He's willing to play multiple positions, which is positional versatility, which Texas I know likes and is any defense likes because you can just put your best 11 on the field and let him go play football, especially in Will Muschamp's scheme. So it's going to be interesting. He could be the big nickel in that scheme because he is big enough to put on the right amount of weight. And, yeah, it's right now it's going to be SMU, Texas, or Florida, which, those are pretty good offer sheets right away. And he's, kind of a guy that's been under-recruited. He's not even ranked on 247. That will not be the case when he signs. He'll probably be a high 3-star, low 4-star recruit. And you'll see bigger teams jump in on him. So, honestly, it's one of those things where there may be a team that's desperate. Like, I don't know if SMU still plays, recruits this way, but let's just say they do. If they're desperate and they really want this guy to come here, they kind of did this with Max Wright. They were willing to pay a premium that Texas wasn't willing to pay because they knew that guy wasn't going to play right away at Texas. If that happens to Isaiah Udom, then guess what? He's probably going to end up at SMU, but he's a really good football player. And if he's willing to sit and develop, I think Texas would be a really good spot for him.
Yeah, no, I think when you watch him, there's a lot of, Jelani McDonald. There's a lot of Xavier Filsaime, these guys that can play multiple different positions, play really hard in the run game, do all that type of stuff. you give him 18 months, you give him a little bit of time to figure out all this stuff, to put on the necessary weight, to get more comfortable. I think he's going to be a really, really good player. And he's playing high level football right now. So he's got more time to kind of figure some things out and get a little bit better. I think if Texas can find it for the right number at the right time, I think it'd be a great addition for him.
Let's move over to Blake Jennings, 6'1.5", 185 pounds. He's also from Texas. What do you think about him?
He's probably the bigger hitter in this class. He's the guy that you're probably going to get a couple more headlines for, because you're going to have to battle Vanderbilt, Florida, Texas Tech, a number of teams for this kid, the number 20 cornerback in the class, I believe, according to, I believe I was looking at Rivals. I'm not sure, but really, really talented kid coming from Katie Tompkins. This kid can really cover. He is plenty long. He has all the ability in the world and does a really, really good job playing the football, whether it's in man coverage or in zone. Runs a 4.48, so has plenty of that, long speed that you might need in that man coverage, and kind of fits the trend of those, Cade Phillips types players. Not necessarily the most big, imposing guys, but play with incredible technique, can really play man coverage incredibly well. Something you're going to need to do in Will Muschamp's defense. So I think it's one of those pickups that you immediately turn on the tape and you say, this totally makes sense. If you can leave this kid alone for, even if it's just 1 year, learning behind Cade Phillips and some of these guys, I think he could be a contributor for you very early on in his career.
Yeah, I think I kind of put him in the category of Samari Matthews. Like, if Samari Matthews plays for Texas this year, wouldn't shock me, but I see him more of a 2-year guy. That's kind of where I see Blake Jenkins. I think he's a good football player, and I think you could probably get away with it in certain situations if he plays his freshman year, plays a lot on special teams most likely. But he's definitely sophomore year. I think he's one of those guys you put out there, and he's one of your 3 cornerbacks on the field. So that's going to be very – and now it could also be a Grayson Littleton situation. I'm not saying he plays like him, but Grayson Littleton wasn't a super highly rated guy. He was like a mid 4-star prospect. So if he comes on campus and just stuns you, usually at one of those class that's just a complete surprise and plays right away, he could be that guy. It wouldn't surprise me because, like you said, he's the 20th ranked cornerback. He's in that range of, is he going to play his freshman year? Is he not? We'll have to see. But I like the tools again. You see, especially in modern football, you want these long, lengthy defensive backs, and you definitely get that with Isaiah Udom and Blake Jenkins. So I like both those guys, and I think they have a chance to play at Texas if they do come here.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think Jenkins, same thing with what we talked about with Udom. Really aggressive when it comes to, especially the screen game. There's a lot of clips of him trying to get blocked by someone in the screen game, just kind of running through that guy and making the play. So even as a kind of more lean type guy, like a guy like Cade Phillips, he definitely does bring his hat and is definitely a very aggressive player. So obviously, when we talk about this 2027 cornerback class, John Meredith, Montre Jackson is someone that Texas is very much circling right now. So those are going to be the guys that will get all the headlines and will be talked about a lot. But if they end up with Blake Jenkins in this class, I can't imagine they're super upset about that one. He's a really talented kid that brings a lot to the table, especially in man coverage.
100%. Let's talk about the last one. Caleb Seiler is going to be visiting in, a month and a week, 5 weeks, 6 weeks. Big guy, 6'8", 275 pounds. So definitely needs to add some weight. And that's why, again, I don't even think he's ranked on 247, but he's 100% a developmental piece. Kind of reminds me a little bit, we already talked about him, of Max Wright. There's also another guy from Arizona. I forget his name. He was committed to Ohio State at one point. I think he might have backed out of his commitment in last year's cycle. But these big guys that are kind of raw and need to put on weight, I kind of throw him into that category. Definitely not a guy that's going to play right away. If he is, you're kind of in trouble, honestly. Maybe not even sophomore year. Like, we're probably talking redshirt sophomore year, junior year. He's going to be playing if he comes to Texas.
Yeah, I kind of put him in like kind of Caden Shearer class. He coming in this season, and another really long, really talented kid that probably won't see the field for a little bit of time as he gets more comfortable. This is a really interesting player. Obviously, 6'8" speaks for itself. That's a very long kid that you can do a lot of really great stuff with. Maybe he is a Monroe Freeling that Georgia had this past season, 6'7", really, really long kid that needed a little bit of time to figure some things out. Now he's probably going to go in the first round of the draft. So this is a guy that you can really mold into a great prospect. And the biggest thing that jumps out when you watch his tape is he finishes. He does a really solid job of, he's really, really big. It's really hard to get behind your pads at 6'8". He does a solid job of it. Obviously, there needs to be more consistency in that aspect, but he's really tough, and he does like to finish, and pancake some kids throughout the process. So he's solid in pass blocking, not the quickest mover as we talked about, but again, I think he's going to have the time to figure some things out. Let's say he does sign, and you have Brandon Baker there for when he comes in, and then maybe you add another really, really talented, experienced guy that can kind of lead him on his way. He's one of those guys that, he's not going to set the world on fire when he walks on campus. He's probably not going to get, the Kelvin Banks comps or anything like that. But he absolutely is someone, maybe when you get to 28, 29, even more, that could be a real contributor for you. And maybe he's one of the biggest pickups in this class as someone that can really kind of take the next step and maybe become a first-round pick like a Monroe Freeling over at Georgia.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because this is a new world of recruiting. And again, all these guys, everyone has money now, guys. That's the thing you got to realize. Like 50 to 60 schools have, if they want $20 million to play with. And if someone looks at Caleb Seiler and says, hey, we're going to pay you $700,000, he's going to go there most likely because Texas isn't going to pay that. They're going to probably pay somewhere between $200,000 to $300,000 and tell him to sit on the bench for 2 years and then get his turn. And it's all about, do you value the money now or later? Because you could be developed better at Texas, go to the NFL as a first, second round pick and make that money up 10 times. It's going to be interesting. It's all new waters, test case. It's going to be very interesting in 5-6 years how guys like this turn out. Do they go to a lower level school too and play right away? Or do they sit at, bigger schools still? I don't know.
Yeah, that's the fascinating thing is we talked about it earlier. A lot of stuff is going to continue to change with the way that college football works. Maybe a hard cap is going to be put in place. Now, people would tell you it's in place, but let's just be totally honest, not really in place. So let's just say that's fully put in place. Then maybe these guys, Vanderbilt might have more money to spend on a guy like Blake Jenkins, Isaiah Udom, maybe SMU is more aggressive there. Caleb Seiler, someone else comes in and kind of steals that one away from you one way or another. You have three guys here that I think are really talented. And I think Udom and Seiler are probably more of those long-term guys that you buy low and you find a way to sell high later on. And I think they fit the description of a lot of guys you've already brought into last couple of classes. And then Blake Jenkins is a guy that you probably fight for a little bit more. Now, I don't think you break the bank by any means because I think there's really talented guys in front of them in this class. But at the end of the day, this is someone that can change your team pretty quickly and absolutely fits the mold of what you want at corner. So I think that's the guy of these three. That's the guy that really stands out in terms of being the elite player, being the one that can step on campus and turn heads pretty immediately. But I think you have three guys that if they all end up in your 2027 class, you're really happy about how that class turned out, not just at the top, but at the bottom with some of these, Udom, Seiler, some of these, deeper cut, as I suppose, pickups.
No, I completely agree. Again, guys, please hit that like button. Please subscribe down below. Let us know what you think of these three prospects and other 2027 prospects. We really appreciate you guys doing that. This has been the 90th edition of Texas Longhorns Live. Again, please hit that like button. Please subscribe down below. We will be back here next Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, 8 p.m. Eastern Time next Monday, 7 p.m. Central if you're in Texas. We really appreciate you guys being here. And as always, hook 'em.